Order. I see the Honourable Minister of National Defence rising on a point of order.
Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Minister of Finance, I wish to table the following documents in the House in both official languages. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. The Honourable Member for Selkirk Interlake Eastman will have 3 minutes remaining in his time for questions and comments when the House next returns to debate on the question. But now we're going to statements by members, and the Honourable Member for Brossard, Saint-Lambert.
Mr. Speaker, October 11th is the International Day of the Girl, a day of celebration that was proclaimed by the United Nations. Canada has joined with other countries in putting the spotlight on girls. Canadian men and women recognize the importance of empowering girls and giving them the opportunity to reach their full potential.
Empowering girls empowers our communities. Globally, equality for girls starts with access to clean water, education, and health care. It also means ensuring that girls lead lives free of violence, oppression, and discrimination. The
International Day of the Girl is an opportunity to celebrate the young, dynamic girls of our country and the positive change that they can bring about.
Last week, on October 11th, I had the great privilege of hosting a discussion with students of Champlain College, St. Lambert. Their enthusiasm, participation, and insights reiterated that girls' rights and the empowerment of younger generations is as crucial today as ever. Un grand merci.
A huge thank you to the students, teachers, and administration of the Collège Champlain Saint-Lambert for having extended such a warm welcome to me on the International Day of the Girl. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, and Rideau Lakes.
Mr. Speaker, when will the government act to compensate the forgotten survivors of thalidomide? For close to 60 years, these Canadians have suffered from the ravages of this horrible drug that was approved by the government of the day, and as they age, their conditions are worsening. In the spring, the Health Committee made a series of recommendations to the Minister after hearing from thalidomide compensation evaluation experts from around the world. The committee recommended that the Canadian criteria for compensation be reevaluated, that survivors who have been rejected receive a physical exam, and that the compensation requirements err on the side of compassion. Another Christmas is fast approaching, and these survivors can't wait another week, month, or year to finally hear some good news from this government. These victims have lived a life of pain, suffering, and discrimination. When will this government do the right thing and help these people?
The Honourable Member for Lac Saint-Louis.
Such energy, vision, tenacity, and commitment to community that they become the foundation of the quality of life we all enjoy. Natalie Chapman is such a person. She has devoted herself to building a loving community around those who are socially isolated. After over 20 years as director of the West Island Association for the Intellectually Handicapped, friends recently gathered to wish Natalie a happy and well-deserved retirement and to honor her remarkable advocacy for those with intellectual disabilities and their families. Natalie believes deeply that it takes a village to raise a child and to care for the vulnerable, but that it also takes goodwill and investment to keep that village strong. Natalie leaves WAIA a resilient community resource, confidently focused on the future. Natalie, you have created a lasting legacy and set the bar high for what it means to care for and fashion a community that truly includes everyone.
Member for Port Moody, Coquitlam.
Mr. Speaker, 1 in 3 Canadians experience a mental illness, or SUD, substance use disorder, in their lifetime. Shockingly, more than 10 Canadians die by suicide each day. Suicide rates of Indigenous youth in Canada are among the highest in the world. More than half of Canadian adults and almost half of Canadian youth say they can't cope with unexpected, difficult problems and day-to-day demands. Many people suffer in silence. World Mental Health Day provides each of us with an opportunity to pause and reflect on the importance of mental health and how we help those living with mental illness. That's why it's so important to recognize World Mental Health Day each year on October 10th. I encourage the government to officially designate October 10th as World Mental Health Day in Canada through resolution or legislation, and thanks to the advocates like Carol Todd for their tireless efforts raising awareness of mental health issues.
The Honourable Member for London West.
Speaker, I rise in the House today to pay my respects to Ms. Daphne Caruana Galizia, the Maltese journalist whose life was tragically cut short yesterday when a bomb exploded in her car shortly after she left her home. Ms. Caruana Galizia bravely investigated corruption and organized crime in Malta. We unequivocally condemn this barbaric attack, and we express our deepest sympathy to her family and to all those affected by her tragic death. We must continue to support journalists from around the world in their pursuit of the truth and the preservation of the Fourth Estate. As a former journalist, I praise Ms. Caruana Galizia's dedication to truth and call upon my colleagues in this House to stand united against this horrific attack. Thank you, Ms. Speaker.
The honourable member for Calgary Forest Lawn.
Mr. Speaker, many Canadians will join Hindus, Sikhs, Jains and others from around the world on October the 19th to celebrate Diwali, the festival of light, which symbolizes good over evil. Diwali is now an international event, even acknowledged by the United Nations. Mr. Speaker, tomorrow evening I'll be hosting the 17th National Diwali celebration on Parliament Hill. We have come a long way since I first inaugurated this event back in 1998. We are the first Western democracy to celebrate Diwali in Parliament. The success of this truly Canadian national event is due to the participation of the Indo-Canadian community. This year, too, more than 30 temples and community organizations from Montreal, Toronto, Calgary, Vancouver, and Ottawa are helping me to organize this event. I invite all my colleagues to join me tomorrow at the event. And, Mr. Speaker, I want to wish everyone a happy Diwali.
The honourable member for Davenport.
Mr. Speaker, buenos tardes. Today is a special day as we are celebrating the second annual Hispanic Day on the Hill. As the daughter of a Mexican immigrant, the Hispanic and Latin American communities are very close to my heart. I am blessed that in Davenport, the riding I represent, there is a thriving, vibrant, and growing Spanish-speaking community, whether from Mexico or Argentina, Ecuador, Colombia, Cuba, El Salvador, or many other Latin American countries. In a world where we see increasing intolerance, Canada is a beacon of light, showing that diversity is a strength. And indeed, the contributions of our Spanish and Latin American communities enrich Canadian society and culture. I would like to close by warmly extending an offer to all colleagues in this House to join us for our second annual Hispanic Day on the Hill celebrations in the Speaker's Chambers today from 5 to 7 p.m. Vivan los Hispanos en Canada y Viva Canada. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Kildonan St. Paul.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today during Women's History Month in recognition of Catherine Rice, Canada's first female professional prospector. Kate was born in 1882 to a wealthy industrial family in St. Mary's, Ontario, attended U of T and graduated in math and physics in 1906. Kate recognized early on the injustice of her half-pay teaching salary and decided to join the Manitoba Gold Rush. To add to the insult, as a non-person, Kate's plan to homestead in the Pas meant she had to have her brother sign the papers. A sharpshooter, survivor, brilliant prospector, Cree linguist, Kate staked many claims in Manitoba on her significant mineral deposits and was a correspondent for the Globe and Mail. Kate loved the majestic beauty of Manitoba's north and for 40 years lived in a modest cabin near Rice Island in Manitoba. This month, let's stake our claim and recognize Kate Rice as an extraordinary role model.
The honourable member for Cypress Hills Grasslands.
Mr. Speaker, it's time to start saying no to the deliberate destruction of the Western Canadian economy. These Liberals are very carefully sabotaging natural resource development and the prosperity that comes with it. For decades, Western Canadian natural resources have led the Canadian economy. Now this government insists on interfering with that prosperity. Their hypocrisy on pipeline approvals, the politicization of the regulatory approval process, and the hundreds of billions of dollars of lost investment are crippling the Western Canadian economy. And on top of that comes an even larger threat, the carbon tax that is about to be imposed by these Liberals. This is a tax built on lies, that it will somehow change our environment, that it will be fiscally insignificant, that this will somehow be revenue neutral, whatever that is. The reality is that this is a massive tax grab for irresponsible governments, that it will exclude some of the worst polluters by letting them buy their way out, and that Western Canada will be the hardest hit. from the West, it looks like this Prime Minister is trying to finish the job that his father started.
The honourable member for Surrey Centre.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to celebrate Small Business Week. As a small business owner, I know firsthand the hard work and sacrifices required to start and grow a business. Small businesses are the backbone of the Canadian economy, accounting for 30% of our GDP and employing over 8 million Canadians, including so many in Surrey. Not only have we cut the small business tax rate by 2%, we've launched Innovative Solutions Canada that allows small businesses to access government procurement tenders and increase capital available to entrepreneurs through the $400 million Venture Capital Catalyst Initiative. Under our government's leadership, the BDC announced a new $50 million fund to support women in tech and exceeded their lending target of $700 million for women entrepreneurs. All this has made Canada the best in the G7 to start a business. To all middle-class entrepreneurs and small business owners across British Columbia, across Canada.
The honourable member for Niagara Centre.
Mr. Speaker, today is Marine Day, a day of celebration for the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence shipping. The Chamber of Marine Commerce is here celebrating with us on Parliament Hill today. It may surprise many to learn that the Great Lakes St. Lawrence shipping contributes 227,000 well-paying jobs to Canada's economy while moving 160 million metric tons of cargo annually. Annually, the Great Lakes St. Lawrence shipping brings in $35 billion in business revenue and contributes $5 billion in tax revenues. Mr. Speaker, in addition to a stellar safety record, this method of shipping also results in an 84% reduction in carbon emissions versus trains or trucks. In the region of Niagara alone, the marine industry plays an integral role in the regional economy. 40 million metric tons of cargo passes through the Welland Canal annually on over 3,000 vessels. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to congratulate all the hardworking people in this critical industry who contribute so much to the success of Canada and U.S. trade.
The honourable member for Kamloops Thompson Caribou.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to extend my sincere condolences to Melissa Seguin and her young sons, Logan and Harrison, for the loss of their father and her husband, Christopher Seguin. I've known Christopher for over 9 years as the Vice President of Advancement at Thompson Rivers University. He generated millions of dollars for student awards, groundbreaking research, and major buildings. Most recently, he stepped up to the plate and provided leadership supporting the BC wildfire evacuees. With the Rotary Club of Kamloops, he established a Starfish Pack program that helps feed young children and volunteered for the Kamloops Food Bank for over the past decade. Sadly, Christopher died at age 39 from an accidental overdose. This exceptional leader of our community highlights the crisis that we have on our hands. No one is immune. I always thought that one day I would be paying tribute to Christopher in this house, looking up at him in the gallery, not delivering a memorial to a good friend. Despite our best efforts, we need to do more, and I do call on the government to call a national...
The honourable member for Bourassa. Mr. Speaker, on the 70th anniversary of Montreal North Chamber of Commerce and Industry, which is in Bourassa riding, I would like to highlight the contributions they have made. The Chamber has been a key player in Montreal North's economic development, and it has been able to renew and adapt its services over the years. Most recently, the Chamber has been involving young people in the vital economic sector, and that is entirely to their credit. I would like to congratulate the outgoing president, Ms. Gaetana Coletta, for her many years of service, and I wish all the best to the new president, Mr. Sylvain Picard, and to all the board members in their endeavours to attract and support new investors in Montreal North. Thank you. The honourable member for Drummond. Mr. Speaker, 2017 is a special year for a few of the organizations that the citizens of Drummondville are so proud of. In the arts and culture sector, the Maison des Arts de Drummondville is celebrating its 50th anniversary. This cultural centre has been instrumental in promoting the performing arts and visual arts locally and regionally. I would like to highlight the quality of work of the entire Maison des Arts team, led by its Director General and Artistic Director, Madame Marie-Pierre Simoneau. In the Drummondville world of sports, Les Requins Swim Club is also celebrating its 50th anniversary. This club has democratized access to swimming in our community while training swimmers who have excelled in Canadian sports. I would also like to highlight the excellent work carried out by its volunteers, led by Mr. Jacques Thibault, as well as the head trainer, Ms. Amélie Poirier. Thank you to all these organizations that have made Drummondville shine.
Prince George, Peace River, Northern Rockies.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This past summer, British Columbia was ravaged by wildfires. And as difficult as this has been, we've seen fellow Canadians step up to help their neighbors. The City of Fort St. John deployed 5 crews over the summer, and it is my privilege to honor them now. Captain Brent Morgan, Captain Ryan Tancock, Captain Simon Cahill, Matt Crompton, James Grant, Ryan Bowie, Jason Donzelman, Adam Horace, Craig Faulkner, Chris Aston, Matt Troiano, Matt Dawes, Gordon McKay, Leo Sullivan, and Brandon Moore. I would also like to especially mention Chief Fred Burrows, who deployed during the first week at Williams Lake and took on the role of task group leader. On behalf of all residents of Prince George, Peace River, Northern Rockies, and British Columbia, I thank all the firefighters and first responders who worked so selflessly this past summer to battle the BC wildfires. From the bottom of all our hearts, thank you.
The honourable member for Cambridge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to bring attention to the International Day for the Eradication of Poverty. 25 years ago, the United Nations declared that this day would be devoted to the poor, the vulnerable, and those who needed our help. Today is an opportunity to acknowledge, support, and listen to the concerns of those experiencing poverty and to discuss and take action to eliminate poverty.
Here, here.
As chair of the HUMA Committee, poverty is an issue of great importance to me. Our committee spent the last year traveling across the country to produce an in-depth poverty reduction report. We analyzed the current state of poverty in Canada and effective solutions to reduce its occurrence.
Here, here.
I'm looking forward to reading the National Poverty Reduction Strategy when the Minister releases it. Poverty is a critical issue, and those of us in this House must always consider our decisions as they affect the most vulnerable among us. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Questions orales, oral questions. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the hypocrisy on the other side of the House is flagrant. During the last election campaign, the Prime Minister accused local business owners of being tax frauds. But it's his right-hand man, the Minister of Finance, who for 2 years hid the fact that he had a private corporation abroad. And it's this minister who avoided paying taxes in Canada. Mr. Speaker, when will they finally tell the truth to Canadians? The Honourable Government House Leader. The Minister has worked with the Ethics Commissioner to ensure that all of her recommendations and all of the conflict of interest laws are followed. The Minister of Finance trusts the Ethics Commissioner and her recommendations. I also want to mention that the Ethics Commissioner has the full confidence of Parliament to carry out her work in an impartial manner. Thank you. Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Mr. Speaker, it's ridiculous. For this Prime Minister, a farmer in Lac-Saint-Jean is a tax fraud. A restaurant owner in Quebec City is a tax fraud. The local mechanic is a tax fraud. The family with the local business, tax fraud. But his right-hand man and the Minister of Finance hid for 2 years the fact that he had money abroad in a private corporation. No problem. Why do the Prime Minister and Finance Minister believe that they're above the law? The Honourable Government House Leader. I am very proud of the announcements that we are making. and the changes that we are making to the tax system. These changes reflect what Canadians told us. The provisions dealing with income sprinkling will help family businesses. And as we make our tax system fairer, we will respect our commitment to lower the corporate tax rate for small businesses. It was at 11% in 2015, and it will be lowered to 9% in 2019. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Position.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister wanted to take all of the questions yesterday, but he won't answer any questions today. The law requires that ministers put their assets in a blind trust within 120 days of being appointed. But we've learned that the Finance Minister chose not to put his family fortune into a blind trust. Now, the law is there to in place to prevent conflicts of interest, and Canadians deserve to know whether the minister is using his position to benefit his family company. So the question is simple. When did the Finance Minister sell his shares in Morneau Chappelle?
Honourable Government House Leader.
Finance has worked with the Ethics Commissioner to ensure that every recommendation and all conflicts of interest rules were followed. Mr. Speaker, as the Minister of Small Business and Tourism, I'm very pleased with the announcement we made yesterday. I'm very pleased that we are working on behalf of Canadians. I'm very pleased that we are working on behalf of our job creators. This week is Small Business Week, and we need to thank our job creators, and that's why yesterday's news was excellent news that we will be reducing the small business tax rate to 9% by 2019. We will continue to do the good work they expect us to do. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
No small business owner expects that the government will target them and call them tax cheats, and that is what the government has been doing for months now. But these are the facts. The law requires ministers to either put their shares in a blind trust or sell them within 120 days of being appointed. We know the Finance Minister chose not to place his Morneau Chappelle shares into a blind trust. So again, this question is very simple. When did the Finance Minister sell his shares in Morneau Chappelle?
Honourable Government House Leader.
Of Finance, like I'm sure all members, work closely with the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner to ensure that the rules are followed. All recommendations that were made to him, he accepted. Every year there is a review of the paperwork, and we will continue to work with her to ensure that all rules are in compliance. But Mr. Speaker, as the Minister of Small Business and Tourism, it is Small Business Week. It is an exciting week for our job creators. We have committed to reducing the small business rate to 9% by 2019. More so, we listened to exactly what their concerns were to ensure that any rules will work in their...
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the one thing that you can always count on with the Liberals is that eventually they start acting like Liberals. This minister has traveled the country for months calling pizza shop owners and farmers tax cheats, accusing all kinds of hardworking Canadians of trying to avoid paying their fair share. And the whole time, it was he himself who was avoiding paying his fair share. Over there who's even slightly embarrassed about the hypocrisy of the Finance Minister keeping his shares out of a blind trust and not disclosing this to the public.
The Minister of Small Business and Tourism. Commitment to Canadians to ensure that their voices were heard in this place. And that's exactly what members of Parliament are doing. We appreciate the constructive feedback that is coming to the government to ensure that any rules that are implemented work in the best interest of Canadians, especially our job creators, our small businesses. Those are the very people that we work hard for every single day. Yesterday was an excellent news announcement. We reduced small business tax rate from 11% to 9% by 2019. We are not moving ahead with the capital gains exemption because we listen to farmers and fishers. We want to ensure that intergenerational transfers of business continue. We will support...
The Honourable Member for Rimouski-Nejet, Témiscouata-les-Basques.
That's a funny answer because this morning the Commissioner said that she never told the Finance Minister not to place his assets in a blind trust.
And my colleague for Skinnabilk Valley wrote to the Ethics Commissioner yesterday to ask her to investigate the links between the Finance Minister's personal assets and Bill C-27, which he sponsored himself. We now know that the Minister did not place his personal fortune in a blind trust, as many people, including the member for Spadina Fort York, believed. And they believe that because that would make sense. So, simple question, why didn't he do that? Honourable Minister of Small Business. Mr. Speaker, as I've said, since his first day on the job, the Finance Minister worked with the Ethics Commissioner to ensure that all of her recommendations and all conflict of interest rules were respected. The Minister of Finance has trust in the Ethics Commissioner and her recommendations. And he's ready to take any necessary steps to avoid conflict of interest or any appearance of conflict of interest. I'd like to reassure everyone that the Ethics Commissioner has the trust of Parliament and the ability to carry out her work in an impartial manner. The Honourable Member for Rimouski-Nejet-Témiscouata-Lévesque. Well, what's concerning in the story is that the minister didn't have the common sense to realize that this would be a problematic situation. It's undeniable that if Bill C-27 passes, Morneau-Chapelle would benefit significantly from an increase in business and an increase in revenue. As a significant investor in this company, the Minister of Finance would personally benefit from the passing of this bill. I have a definition of conflict of interest. Perhaps the minister can tell us his definition. The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, this is Small Business Week in Canada, and I'm very proud, as the Minister of Small Business and Tourism, to congratulate them for the work that they do. The changes that we're making reflect what Canadians told us. The proposals having to do with income sprinkling will be simplified to help family businesses. As we make our system fairer, we will continue to respect our commitment to lower the small business tax rate. The rate was 11% in 2015, and it will be lowered to 9% by 2019.
You know, Mr. Speaker, it's not just the opposition who believed that the finance minister's massive investments were in a blind trust. That's what many Liberals believed as well. Earlier this month, the member for Spadina-Fort York tweeted that the finance minister's shares in Morneau-Chapelle were, and I'll quote, put in an arm's-length blind trust when he was sworn in 2 years ago. End of quote. This is about a serious breach of potential conflict of interest. So will my friend, the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Families, Children and Social Development, stand in this House and explain when he was told this untruth and who told it to him?
Honourable Minister of Small Business and Tourism.
He is working with the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner. He will continue to do this important work. What's more important, Mr. Speaker, is that it's Small Business Week, and this government has committed to reducing the small business tax rate from 11% to 9%. This government has committed to listening and engaging with Canadians. Not only have we listened, we have responded to the very real challenges and concerns that they are facing. We will continue to ensure that the tax system is more equitable, that it works for more Canadians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for Skeena-Bulkley Valley.
So I guess it's not just the finance minister who isn't taking questions today. My friend from Toronto must have gotten the PM shove, as they call it. This is an important question because we may be looking at the most blatant conflict of interest in modern Canadian history. The finance minister introduced Bill C-27. This bill would significantly benefit Morneau-Chapelle and all of its shareholders, like the finance minister. He's not divested nor placed his millions of shares in a blind trust. So what's worse, Mr. Speaker? This massive, troubling conflict of interest, or the fact that Liberals don't seem to think there's a problem in the first place?
Minister of Small Business and Tourism.
Speaker,
Order.
Minister of Small Business and Tourism, I will tell you I'm very proud that this government is actually listening and engaging with our job creators to ensure that the tax system works for them. The minister has full confidence in the Ethics Commissioner and her recommendations and is willing to take any further steps to avoid conflicts or any perceptions of conflicts as deemed appropriate by the Ethics Commissioner. More so, Mr. Speaker, this government is taking action to ensure that the economy continues to grow, that our small businesses can continue to create jobs in their communities, benefiting the entire community. We will continue to work hard on behalf of our small business owners. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Carleton.
The Minister of Finance started by saying he had revealed all of his holdings to the Ethics Commissioner. Now we know he has an offshore company in France that he did not disclose. He then said to the media, and I quote, "I suspect all my assets will go into a blind trust." That was 2 years ago. We now know that that didn't happen either. Finally, he claimed the ethics commissioner told him he shouldn't put his holdings in a blind trust. Today, she testified under oath that she told him no such thing. We can't believe this finance minister. When did he sell his shares in...
Secretary, the Minister of Finance.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to reassure this House that the Minister of Finance was always very transparent with the Ethics Commissioner and always worked very proactively with her to ensure that all rules were followed and her recommendations were followed. He's always proactive in the way that he works with the Ethics Commissioner. He even wrote to the Commissioner to see if there were recommendations, additional recommendations that might apply, and he's committed to following any of those recommendations so that he will always fully respect the rules that govern us all in this House.
For Carleton.
The finance minister had spokespeople from Morneau Shepell tell the media that his Morneau Shepell shares were in a blind trust. He had the parliamentary secretary to the Minister of Families tell me on Twitter that his holdings were in a blind trust. He told the media himself 2 years ago that he suspected his holdings would go into a blind trust. We know now that none of that was true. We also know that Morneau Shepell has holdings in the tax haven of Barbados. When did the minister sell his shares in Morneau Shepell?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, as I said, the Minister of Finance has always worked closely with the Ethics Commissioner, and he's always done so transparently to ensure that all the rules are respected. We trust the Ethics Commissioner, and the Minister even wrote to the Commissioner to ask for another meeting to discuss his assets so that he can follow her recommendations when it comes to his personal assets. Thank you.
Member for Milton.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, they may trust the Ethics Commissioner, but how can Canadians trust these Liberals?
Exactly.
As of late yesterday, the Parliamentary Secretary for Urban Affairs was still falsely claiming that the Finance Minister's assets were in a blind trust. The Prime Minister himself indicated that it was the Ethics Commissioner's responsibility in these matters, yet she testified today that it was the Minister's choice not to put the shares in a blind trust. The daily revelations of this Finance Minister show nothing but hypocrisy. And I want to know one simple thing. When did the Finance Minister sell his shares in Morneau Shepell?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I've said, the Minister of Finance, from the very beginning of his term, has worked with the Ethics Commissioner to ensure that she had an understanding of his assets and that so he can respect all of the rules that govern us in this House. He's also committed to following any of her recommendations, following his request for a meeting with her. And I would also like to say that he's a man of integrity. For the last 2 years, he's committed himself to public service, and he has a record for which the Conservatives' record pales in comparison. We've achieved prosperity for all Canadians.
Hello.
Order.
The honourable member for Milton.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Finance Minister seems to have one set of rules for himself and a completely other set for everybody else. He made the choice to attack hardworking Canadian entrepreneurs while protecting his own personal wealth. He is the one that's hiding an offshore account that he won't tell Canadians why he didn't put his vast personal wealth into a blind trust like the law requires. Let me be clear. This was his choice. Always his choice, and these are his ethics we're talking about. And I just want to know, when did the Finance Minister sell his shares in Morneau Shepell?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Ethics Commissioner has the full confidence of this House, and the Minister of Finance has committed to working with her. He even asked for a meeting with her so that he can follow all of her recommendations. And this is what he's done from the very beginning of his term, even before he took office. He will continue to work with the Ethics Commissioner, just as is expected of any member of this House. The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Mr. Speaker, this is a serious question. The Minister of Finance is the architect of all of the economic and tax policies for Canada. Morneau Shepell is a billion-dollar industry from Bay Street, which... So clearly this is a conflict of interest. It's the perfect definition of it. The question is clear. When did the minister sell his shares in Morneau Shepell? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, since he took office, the Minister of Finance met with the Ethics Commissioner, worked with the Ethics Commissioner, and followed the recommendations of the Ethics Commissioner. He is committed to doing the same thing in the future and to work closely with the Commissioner, who has the full confidence of this House.
Député.
The Honourable Member for Louis Saint-Laurent. Mr. Speaker, one thing is clear. The member for Louis Hébert has the Prime Minister's authorization to answer questions instead of the Finance Minister. But seriously, Mr. Speaker, this is an untenable situation. This is a question of the Minister's moral authority. When did the Minister sell his shares in Morneau Chapelle? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I've said, the Minister of Finance has worked with the Ethics Commissioner since the day he took office. This work will continue, and he even asked for an appointment with the Ethics Commissioner to ensure that he's respecting all of the rules. And if you'll allow me, Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Finance is a man who cares about public service. For 2 years, he's worked for Canadians. He's given them the best growth rate we've seen in 10 years. He's reduced childhood poverty, and I'm very proud to serve him, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Berthier-Masquinongé. Mr. Speaker, well, today it's been confirmed that the Americans want to end our supply management system within the next 10 years. Plus, they want 5% of our market. When it comes to protecting supply management, the Liberals only know how to kowtow before our trading partners. For us, protecting the supply management system is non-negotiable. Instead of repeating the same mistakes from CETA, Canada Minister confirmed today that he will not allow any more gaps in the supply management system. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, our government strongly supports supply management. We also support families and producers. Our government has maintained its commitment to listening to Canadians when it comes to trading issues. We recently held a roundtable concerning NAFTA with Canadian farmers, including dairy and chicken farmers. The question of supply management, or rather the demands of the U.S. concerning supply management, are unacceptable, and we will continue to support our farmers.
The Honourable Member for Essex.
Supporting supply management means saying no. Mr. Speaker, dairy is officially on the table. The U.S. has called for a definitive end to Canada's supply managed system and demanding immediate further access to our markets. This is outrageous. Both Liberals and Conservatives have no problem putting our supply managed sector up for grabs in trade deals like TPP and CETA. But this time, the Liberals must protect our industry and say no. Will the minister drop the spin and finally tell the U.S. that supply management is not on the table?
Hear, hear.
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, we are the party that set up supply management, and we will continue to defend it. The trade of dairy between Canada and the U.S. is largely in favor of the U.S. by a ratio of 5 to 1. They've seen growth of 209% since NAFTA came into force, and they have a trade surplus of $246 million. I would like to reassure the House, and as well as dairy farmers, that we will be defending our supply management program.
Mr. Speaker, it's disturbing to discover that the Finance Minister broke the law by hiding his offshore corporation for 2 years. It's even more disturbing to now find out that he did not put his millions of dollars in shares in a blind trust as required by the law. That must be because he sold the shares, otherwise he broke the law. So my question for the Finance Minister is, when did he sell his shares in Morneau Chapelle?
As I've said, the Minister of Finance has worked with the Ethics Commissioner from his first day in office to ensure that he respects all of the rules that govern us in the House and all of the recommendations. Very recently, the Minister wrote to the Ethics Commissioner and is willing to follow all of her recommendations, including a blind trust. Thank you.
Well, the same talking points as on Billionaire Island and the Liberal Cash for Access fundraisers. I asked a very simple question. The Finance Minister has said hundreds of times that his government is open and transparent, but he refuses to come clean with Canadians. He's been hiding the ownership of his offshore corporation, and now he won't come clean with Canadians about his business interests that put him into this conflict of interest. When will the minister finally come clean with Canadians and tell them when he still owns shares of Morneau Chapelle?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, the Finance Minister has always been open and transparent with the Ethics Commissioner. He has committed to continuing to do so and to taking all of the steps necessary to respect the rules and recommendations and the rules that govern all of us in this House. The Honourable Member for Richmond-Athabasca. Mr. Speaker, the rules are very simple, and they're the same for all 338 members in this House. We need to declare within 60 days our assets. I'm wondering if the Minister of Finance is working for his own interests, or the interests of Liberals, or the interests of all Canadians. It's been 2 years that he's been hiding his personal situation. So the question is very simple. I don't know if the Parliamentary Secretary can try to answer it. Did the Minister sell the shares in his company? And if not, when will he sell them? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I said, the Minister of Finance will always work with the Ethics Commissioner to respect the rules that govern us, but if he wants to know in whose interest the Minister of Finance is working, well, he's working in the interest of all the Canadian children who've been lifted out of poverty with the Canada Child Benefit. We've created over 400,000 jobs. He's working in the interest of economic growth. We have the strongest economic growth in the last 10 years, which means that that's more prosperity for all Canadians. This minister is working in the interests of Canadians regardless of their income level.
Member for Chilliwack, HoC.
When he was elected, the finance minister held about $30 million in shares in Morneau-Chapelle. When he was appointed finance minister, he promised to put his fortunes in a blind trust, but he broke that promise. For the last 2 years as finance minister, he's been making decisions that could have directly helped his family business, and we know he's gone out of his way to protect his family fortunes from any negative tax changes. When will the Prime Minister stop sheltering his finance minister? Let him answer the question. When did he sell his shares in Morneau-Chapelle?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, I would inform my colleague that the Minister of Finance wrote to the Ethics Commissioner today to ask her for an appointment. He's committed to taking all of the measures necessary to deal with his personal assets. This is a commitment that he made, and this is a commitment that he's been keeping since he's been the Finance Minister. He's been working with the Ethics Commissioner from the very beginning.
Order. The Honourable Member for Vancouver, Kingsway.
Mr. Speaker, we know that millions of Canadians can't afford the medicines they need, and the PBO confirms that we can provide prescription coverage to every single Canadian while saving billions of dollars. Later today, this House will vote on an NDP motion to start negotiations with the provinces and territories within 1 year to create universal pharmacare. This is a common-sense proposal, sound public policy that helps millions and saves billions. So will the Liberals join us and support pharmacare for all Canadians?
Honourable Minister of Health.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Canadians pay too much for prescription drugs, and our government is taking bold action now to bring down the prices, while we also explore the need for a national formulary. We joined provinces and territories as members of the Pan-Canadian Pharmaceutical Alliance. And also in Budget 2017, we're investing over $140 million to help improve access to pharmaceuticals. These actions will save Canadians money as we continue to work with provinces and territories to make prescription drug prices more affordable and more accessible to all Canadians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very good.
The Honourable Member for Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagotte. Mr. Speaker, we've been informed that the number of opioid overdoses surpassed 60 cases in Montreal this fall, and this situation is only getting worse all over Canada. Many stakeholders are asking that the government declare a state of emergency. Listen, even President Trump recognizes that the situation in the United States requires serious, sustained effort and significant funding. What is this government waiting for to declare that the opioid crisis has become a Canada-wide emergency? The Honourable Minister of Health.
Public health crisis in Canada, and we are responding in a way that is comprehensive, collaborative, and compassionate, and also evidence-based. We recently announced an investment of $7.5 million that will enhance the development of evidence-based practices that can be used by those dealing with this crisis on the ground. These build on our investment in Budget 2017 and many actions to date. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for Vancouver Centre.
Mr. Speaker, today is both the International Day for the Eradication of Poverty and Housing Day on the Hill. Given the recent Poverty Reduction Conference and the unprecedented investments over the past two budgets, we know that fighting poverty and meeting Canada's housing challenges are at the forefront of this government's agenda. Could the Minister of Families, Children and Social Development tell the House what he is doing on those important issues?
Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like first to congratulate my colleague from Vancouver Centre for being such a strong advocate of a more inclusive and more fair society. Our government believes that housing is a cornerstone of the lives of families and communities. We are going to launch in the next few weeks the first ever national housing strategy, which will be a key input in our poverty reduction strategy. We look forward to building on those strategies to make sure that all Canadians have a real and fair chance to be well and to succeed in our society.
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-Lérable. Mr. Speaker, yesterday I was in Lac-Saint-Jean and I met dairy farmers who are worried for their future. What are they worried about? Liberal doublespeak in the supply management file. The Minister of Foreign Affairs can try all she wants to put the cat back in the bag. Her parliamentary secretary was clear. When it comes to supply management, there is room to negotiate with the Americans. Why is the Liberal government ready to negotiate the future of milk, egg and poultry farmers and put their future at risk? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, our government is entirely in favour of supply management and will continue to defend it. As I said earlier, trade between Canada and the United States favours the U.S. Canada is the second export market of dairy for the U.S., surpassed only by Mexico. We have clearly indicated that we will defend supply management and the system that is in place. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-Lérable. These are just words. The Minister of Finance and the Prime Minister think that farmers use strategies to save on taxes, and their economic advisor, Mr. Wolfson, said that family farms don't exist, and the Parliamentary Secretary said, and I quote, in Denton on October 11th when he was talking about supply management, "Is there room to negotiate?" Of course. Of course, Mr. Speaker. When will the government stop this doublespeak and put an end to its idea of negotiating supply management with the Americans? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, as I already said, our government strongly supports supply management, farmers and their families. We will continue, as we have already said since the very beginning in the House, to continue to defend farmers and defend their interests in the face of the Americans. The proposals of the United States are unacceptable. Therefore, we are going to continue to support our dairy, poultry, and egg farmers and all our farmers.
West.
Mr. Speaker, Conservatives know that protecting Canadian farmers from unfair competition and dumping is critical to maintaining economic stability in rural communities. American negotiators are aggressively pushing to unlimited access to Canada's supply-managed agriculture sectors. This threatens farmers across Canada, including those that produce milk, eggs and poultry. Can Canadian farmers trust the Liberals to preserve the family farm? Does this government have a plan to protect Canadians' way of life?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary for Canada-U.S. relations. Order.
Mr. Speaker, Canada is the biggest market for the United States, bigger than China, Japan, and the UK combined. And as you know, we're dealing with the most protectionist U.S. government since the 1930s. We defend supply management. We believe it. We believe in the family farms. We would like to encourage our neighbours to the south to emulate the good examples set by our negotiations in the CETA trade issues. However, having said this, within NAFTA there are certain things we cannot accept, we will not accept. We'll continue to defend our values. Thank you, Mr.
The Honourable Member for Durham.
Mr. Speaker, the Parliamentary Secretary for Canada-U.S. relations clearly knows how to win friends and influence people in the U.S., because just 3 days after he said he was open to negotiating supply management, the Americans tabled their offer. They want an end to supply management, Mr. Speaker. Under Conservative governments, the Americans respected our system of supply management. But this Liberal government is literally ready to sell the farm, Mr. Speaker. When will that member and this government stop saying one thing to Canadian farmers and another thing to their friends in Washington?
Parliamentary Secretary. Order.
Mr. Speaker, we on this side of the House and those who are fortunate enough to be on our portion on the other side believe in supply management. Indeed, everyone in this House, with the exception of certain members of the Progressive Conservative Party of Canada, believe in supply management. Same is true of the gang opposite, Mr. Speaker. We are delighted to defend supply management and will do so at every opportunity. Thank you.
The honourable member for Regina Louvain.
Mr. Speaker, it's been a year since this government's self-imposed deadline to fix the Phoenix boondoggle came and went. Last weekend, when asked for a new deadline, the Treasury Board president said, quote, "I could pull a figure out of the air and give it to you, but I'd rather tell the truth." Wow. Of course, the truth is that this government doesn't have a plan to fix Phoenix, so my question for the minister is simple. We know you don't have a plan to fix Phoenix, but when will you have a plan to have a plan?
I have to remind the honourable member for Regina Louvain to direct his comments to the chair. I think he was here. Well, we won't talk about who was here, when, and all that, but yesterday I mentioned to members that, of course, if you say you in here, you're referring to the Speaker. I don't think he meant to refer to the Speaker. The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement.
I apologize, Mr. Speaker. I thank the honourable member for his question. Mr. Speaker, it's unacceptable that hardworking public servants are not paid the money they are owed. Recently, a independent third-party report clarified that decisions made by the previous government put this project at a significant risk and exposed it to significant risk for failure. We are doing everything we can, Mr. Speaker, in the areas of governance, partnerships, business processes, and capacity to make sure that public servants get the money they are owed, and we will not stop until this is fixed. Thank you.
Order. Order. I'm having trouble hearing what people are saying, and I have to hear them so we know if there's someone breaking any rules.
Order. The Honourable Member for Jonquière. Mr. Speaker, it's been 2 years that this failure has been the responsibility of who? The Liberals. Even the senior executive of IBM Canada, which designed Phoenix, admitted yesterday that the system is badly made. How much more time is required to make sure that 150,000 people are paid correctly and on time, of course? Not the company that designed the system and not the government, so I'll try one more time. Is there someone who knows how much more time workers will have to wait for this disaster to be dealt with? The Honourable Minister of Public Services. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is unacceptable for public servants to not get the salary that they are owed. We are taking concrete steps to resolve the problem, including investing $140 million in recruitment, hiring, and training of new employees, and providing salary advances, as well as creating satellite offices. Believe us, Mr. Speaker, we're not going to leave anything to chance. The Honourable Member for Beauce. Mr. Speaker,
in grants from the Government of Canada to develop the C-Series. The public funds were given to a Canadian corporation to develop Canadian expertise. But yesterday, we learned that Bombardier sold a majority stake in the C-Series to a foreign corporation, Airbus. So my question is very simple. Will the government immediately take action to recover the millions of dollars that should have been given to Canadian taxpayers?
The Honourable Minister of Economic Development.
Mr. Speaker, with respect to the joint venture, the repayment terms have not changed. But what I don't understand is what the member opposite and the official opposition have against the aerospace sector. When we invest in research and development, they opposed us. When duties were imposed on Canadian airplanes, they went missing. And now we have more market access, which means more production and more jobs in Canada. And again, they're opposing this. Mr. Speaker, what do they have against the aerospace sector and good quality jobs in Canada?
The Honourable Member for Beauce. Mr. Speaker, what we don't like are private agreements, secret agreements, that the Government of Canada negotiated with Bombardier. The Minister says that Bombardier has to repay, but And that's very simple. But now they're dealing with a new corporation, a foreign corporation. And the question is very simple. When will taxpayers be paid back for these amounts that were given to a Canadian company to develop Canadian expertise here in Canada? When will Canadians be paid back? The Honourable Minister of Economic Development. Our government supports the aerospace sector, and we will continue to work for the aerospace sector.
Speaker, under the Investment Canada Act, the process that I oversee, we will make sure that we get maximum economic benefit. That means the head office will be here in Canada. That means production will be here in Canada. That means good quality jobs will be here in Canada. Jobs that pay 60% on average more than other manufacturing jobs. We will always defend Canada's national interest, and we will always defend the aerospace sector and the good quality jobs from coast to coast to coast.
The Honourable Member for Peace River Westlaw.
Well, we expect support for Alberta, not Alabama. Yesterday, Bombardier announced that the French company Airbus would receive a majority stake in the Bombardier C-Series aircraft. Now Airbus can't really lose here, and Bombardier can't really lose either. After all, they're riding high on millions of Canadian taxpayer dollars. Do you know who stands to lose, Mr. Speaker? Canadian taxpayers. Can the minister guarantee Canadian taxpayers will be fully repaid by Bombardier before this transaction is approved?
Honourable Minister of Economic Development.
Again, Mr. Speaker, I don't know why the members opposite continue to undermine our aerospace sector. This is an anchor company that has made a world-class plane. Now this plane has access to the world. It has access to global markets. That means more production. That means more jobs. What do the members opposite have against this? We'll continue to support our aerospace sector, and we'll do our due diligence. We'll do our homework under the Investment Canada Act to maximize the economic benefits for all Canadians, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member,
The Honourable Member for Dorval-Lachine-LaSalle. Mr. Speaker, in my riding, creative industries are an integral part of the economy. We all know that Canadian Francophone creators are among the most respected in the world. Recently, the Minister of Canadian Heritage revealed her vision for a Creative Canada, which includes major investments in our creative people through the Canada Media Fund. Can the Minister provide more details on her historic vision and this investment? Thank you. The Honourable Minister of Canadian Heritage. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank my colleague from Dorval-Lachine-LaSalle for her question and her excellent work. The government is going to contribute to the Canada Media Fund in order to stabilize its funding. With this new investment, we are directly supporting jobs in the creative sector, our producers, our directors, our actors, and our technical teams. Last year, the fund invested $117 million in Francophone projects throughout the country, and we are committed to supporting our content creators.
Mr. Speaker, we know the Liberals are desperate for money when they have to start taxing discounted hamburgers and other employee discounts. The Revenue Minister claims that she has asked officials to fix the problem, but she won't disclose to us just how she plans on doing that. Now, this won't hurt French villas, or those that own French villas, I should say, those among us who may do that, but it will mean higher taxes for those who are hardworking Canadians, such as single moms or first-time employees, new Canadians, young workers. Now, will the minister finally table in this House the instructions that she sent to her officials, or is this just simply another broke?
The Honourable Minister of National Revenue. Mr. Speaker, from the beginning of our mandate, the government concentrated on helping the middle class. The documents in question did not reflect the intentions of our government. I will repeat, Mr. Speaker, that the rules have not changed. We continue to make sure that our actions support the middle class. And as the Prime Minister said, we are not going to target employee discounts in the retail sector.
Member for Burnaby South.
Mr. Speaker, last week I met with residents of the Post 83 cooperative in my riding, and they're very worried. 45 families could lose their homes when the federal government pulls funding from cooperative housing next year. Given the looming expiry of cooperative operating agreements across Canada, will the government agree to make this funding permanent and protect the housing for low and middle-income residents?
Minister of Social Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I congratulate the member for his question, which is exactly what we want to hear. The kind of housing support that the federal government needs to provide to all sorts of housing providers in Canada, including cooperatives, non-profit housing providers. I had the privilege of meeting many of them this morning. They are keen on working with us for the long term. They have waited for us for a long time, and we're back, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member for Northwest Territories.
Mr. Speaker, Indigenous Canadians make up 4% of Canada's population, but 25% of the federal prison population. We know that there is historical and systemic issues that have combined to cause this problem, and that's why the government has been focusing on bringing about socio-economic change in collaboration with Indigenous communities. Will the Minister of Public Safety tell us what he's doing to ensure that Indigenous peoples are involved in the criminal justice system, that they will receive the support they need to rehabilitate and heal, which ultimately makes Canada communities safer?
Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the member for the Northwest Territories for his work. The overrepresentation of Indigenous people in our criminal justice system is an intolerable situation, and we're working very hard to address it. Yesterday, I was pleased to announce an investment of $10 million in the Indigenous Community Corrections Initiative to support community-based, culturally relevant projects providing alternatives to incarceration and supporting safe reintegration. It's part of $110 million in the last budget to help fix systemic problems in the criminal justice system.
Honourable member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Mr. Speaker, today human rights activists and leading members of the Muslim community brought a petition to the House of Commons asking the government for stronger action on the atrocities being committed against the Rohingya. We add our voices to theirs as we have for over a year and a half. Specifically, petition organizer Fareed Khan said that he would like to be able to ask the Prime Minister why he did not raise this issue during his speech to the UN. Mr. Khan cannot ask the Prime Minister that question directly, so I will. Why didn't the Prime Minister speak about the Rohingya during his UN General Assembly speech?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, everybody in this government is seized with the issue of the Rohingya. We know that the responsibility for ending the persecution of the Rohingya falls squarely upon the Commander-in-Chief, the military leadership in Myanmar, and Aung San Suu Kyi. On September 30th, the minister spoke directly with the Commander-in-Chief, and the minister said to him that the violators of human rights must be held accountable, humanitarian access into the region must be permitted, and the Annan report must be implemented. Canada's ambassador to Myanmar has joined 50 other foreign ambassadors to visit the Rakhine state. And, Mr. Speaker, we continue to be seized in playing a role in resolving this situation.
The honourable member for Mirabel. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday, there was a threat because the Americans are demanding the end of supply management, and so they are attacking our farmers. Do you really think we're going to let that go? Absolutely not. Will the government stand up and refuse to abandon our farmers by leaving the negotiating table when supply management is raised? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Agriculture. Mr. Speaker, our government strongly supports supply management, farmers and their families. Our government is maintaining its commitment to listen to Canadians in matters of international trade. Recently, we held a roundtable on NAFTA with Canadian farmers, including dairy, egg, and poultry farmers. When it comes to supply management, the proposals of our American partners are unacceptable. We will continue to support dairy, egg, and poultry farmers and all of our agricultural interests. Thank you. The Honourable Member from Manicouagan. Mr. Speaker, there are people on the North Coast and in all our regions who have worked their entire lives, folks who have put their heart and talents into a business and then find themselves completely at a loss because the company goes bankrupt. Just like the retirees of Cliffs Natural Resources, for example, when one has to choose between eating or paying their chemo or an ostomy, things are going very badly. What is the minister waiting for? How many broken lives does he need to act? The Honourable Minister of Economic Development.
The member opposite for her very thoughtful question. As she knows, these types of particular instances that occur with job losses sometimes go before the courts under the CCAA. But more importantly, our government understands that we need to be there to help these citizens during these difficult times, help these workers, help the families, and help these different communities. We'll remain engaged. We'll work with the stakeholders, the communities, to find solutions and a path forward to create more opportunities and more jobs, Mr. Speaker.
Order. 40 years ago today, the gavel-to-gavel parliamentary proceedings of the House of Commons were broadcast live on television for the very first time. Cette première.
This first live broadcast introduced television as the new electronic Hansard. The success of the Canadian experiment has inspired other legislative bodies to allow broadcasting, with the House of Commons often serving as a model.
We've come a long way since that first live television broadcast, and despite the rapidly advancing forms of social and digital communications reframing how we communicate with Canadians, broadcasting service continues to play a key role in keeping our fellow citizens informed about the business of Parliament. We even manage the sound quite well, despite voices like this. For the past 25 years, the Cable Public Affairs Channel, or CPAC, has worked in partnership with us to ensure that Canadians have a front-row view into the very center of our democracy. Nous leur sommes.
For this, we are grateful to them. Thank you.
Ordre du jour.
Orders of the day. Point of order. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, given how important the issue is, please allow me to remind you about something that was said in this House. The Parliamentary Secretary, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, was asked an excellent question and said in answer that I did not say the words that are being quoted. However, I would like to table the transcription of the video where the Parliamentary Secretary says clearly.
Of course. Donc, je demande le consentement pour déposer.
So I would ask unanimous consent to table this official transcript of the video.
Yeah, le consentement.
Is there unanimous consent? No, there is not unanimous consent.
Orders of the day, government orders. Resuming debate of the opposition motion regarding the Minister of Finance's documents submitted to the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner, standing in the name of Mr. Poilievre.